Good morning, everybody. Wow, this is great. Shout out to Ghana. Shout out to Motherwell. Shout out to Paisley. Shout out to Royston. In the Bible, we see that blessings are powerful. So let me start off with something very powerful. I bless you now in the name of Jesus, that you would know Jesus more wonderfully. May God bless you and protect you and smile upon you and be gracious to you and show you his favor and give you his peace. In the name of Jesus, may it be. All right. If you're new here or are visiting or you don't listen to anything I say, we are in a study here on the book of James, and I suppose the main thing you need to know is when James is looking around at all the Christians, he keeps noticing that real Christians were missing it. At least missing it in some ways, and sure they might be Christians, but they're missing it when it comes to living their lives as Christians, living the life that we're called to live. The topic today is wisdom. It's wisdom. And he started his book talking about this. In verse 5, he says, if any of you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. That was in verse 5. But now he comes back to the topic in chapter 3 here because he knows he's writing to Christians. And if he's learned anything leading the church over the years, he knows that Christians do a great job thinking that they are fine. They're fine. My guess is that our starting point today with the topic of wisdom is, sure, I've got that. Wisdom, I mean, I'm not, I'm totally fine in that area. I'm well within the box. Great. Next topic. I can think of a few people who need this, but, I'm good to go when it comes to wisdom. But once again, just like we talked about last week with the topic of our words, James is wanting to challenge. He's wanting to wake up Christians to really assess the topic of wisdom in their lives, because clearly these Christians think they're wise. And James is like, let's talk about this. Let me just read one verse to start this off. I'm in James 3, starting in verse 13. If you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. Basically, James is like, hello, Christians. Hello, Christians. You who think you're so wise. If you're wise, prove it. Prove it. Now, how do you prove that you're wise? Is it by outsmarting everyone? No. Is it by being more successful than other people? No. It says, living an honorable life, doing good works, humility. Like those are the things that prove it. Now that can be confusing a little bit because when we're talking about wisdom, and specifically biblical wisdom, or as James is going to refer to it in this passage, wisdom from above, but what is that? What is that? Well, some people might say wisdom is being a great advice giver. I give good, deep advice. I'm wise, and I can help people that way. That's not really biblical wisdom. Other people might think of wisdom as, okay, I'm brilliant. I understand things faster and more deeply than other people seem to. Okay, but that's not wisdom from above. Some people might be like, it's like having great theological understanding about vast amount of things. Okay, again, that's not it. When the Bible's talking about wisdom and what James has in mind, it's repeated all through the Bible in so many books of the Bible. Proverbs is a classic, though. Proverbs chapter 9, it's the fear of the Lord. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Or in Proverbs 15, fear of the Lord teaches wisdom. Humility precedes honor. So we need to grapple with this for a moment here because if the fear of the Lord is central to biblical wisdom, okay, what is this? What is this fear of the Lord thing, and how do you know if you have it? Well, firstly, real wisdom understands what's really going on. And what's really going on is that God is really real. Wisdom starts there. This God is really real perspective is this first piece connected to wisdom, because the first piece, if you know that God is really real and that he's powerful, that he's all-knowing, that he's good, that he blesses and he disciplines. He disciplines people based on their life choices. That ought to start to reshape a little bit of our decision-making process and maybe get us the question, wait, do I really want this my life to be centered around me and my family and my circle of priorities, or do I want my life to be centered around God and pleasing God, living my life to please God? Because when God is pleased, favor flows. That's where wisdom starts. It starts with knowing that God is really real, but also, what does it mean to have the fear of the Lord as forgiven Christians? Well, the biblical God perspective that we need to have is, when we live to please God, favor flows, yes. When we live for ourselves, favor goes. It goes away, and we start to walk outside of God's blessing, and even into some God intentional frustrating of our lives and resistance and discipline from God. And I think about that, I'm like, wow, what a terrible thought. What a fearful thought. Life is hard enough as it is, right? Life is hard enough. The last thing I need is a really real God making my life harder because of how he feels about what I'm doing and how I'm living. So that's connected to this good fear of the Lord stuff. Now back to James. Okay, so James, as you would expect by now as we're going through this study, that wisdom is not about what's going on in your head only. James is very much about the topics that he's talking about. They have to be lived out. They have to be proven by how we live to please God. So now he's going to go on and clarify in this section, because Christians like us, who can think we're wise enough, are missing it. And so James is like, I'm going to highlight a couple things that prove that you don't have this wisdom, and then some things that are indicators of you having the kind of wisdom that we're talking about. And this is for Christians. So first of all, the things that prove that we don't have wisdom, let's just start again at verse 13 here, James 3. If you're wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you are bitterly jealous, and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. Okay, there's two earthly, unspiritual, and demonic things that prove that you don't have wisdom from above, God's wisdom as a Christian. The first one is jealousy. Jealousy. There is a good jealousy, and there's evil jealousy. Most jealousy is evil, even if it has a mix of good in it. But, I need to say God is jealous, and that's the good kind. And what does that look like? This is important for us to know. God is jealous. He wants to be your only. of all things spiritual, God wants to be your only God. He wants us to forsake and flee and have nothing to do with anything spiritual other than God alone. So, like no fortune telling, no, whatever you think it's legit or not, like just stay away from it. Horoscopes and palm reading and Ouija boards and, nothing to do with like chi stuff and, any non-God stuff, any God stuff that's not Yahweh, the God of the Bible. I mean, other spiritual things can be real and maybe helpful at times, but they are forbidden for God's people. God's jealous. God's a jealous God in all the good ways, and he insists on being the only when it comes to spiritual things. Okay. There is godly jealousy connected to marriage is basically the same, but here's the trick. Everyone who feels jealous, let's say like connected to marriage and marriage relationship, assumes that their kind of jealousy is only the good kind because there is a good kind of jealousy in there. But very often you find mixed jealousy. And it becomes toxic. And how do you know when you've crossed that line? Well, we're not going to talk about this a lot today, but you look at the fruit. You look at the results. And many times you just see that the fruit has crossed the line with some good and some bad, but it's not pure anymore. And so it's not good. Most of the jealousy that we experience is of the evil kind. Jesus was rejected and crucified out of envy, out of jealousy. But jealousy, here's the thing, here's the fruit of it. It destroys relationships with people in your life. It destroys relationships, it destroys friendships, it destroys connections with people. We end up dishonoring, disliking, distancing ourselves from people who deserve to be honored and loved. And just because they make us feel jealous or they make us feel insecure or they or like we're not as great. But jealousy destroys your connections. It destroys friendships. So you put that in there and you act on it so that you maybe can feel better about yourself, but do you really feel better about yourself? Or do you just feel alone? Godly wisdom, holy wisdom says we live humbly, we live honorably, we love people well. But jealousy, as what we mostly experience, like this here, the ungodly kind, is earthly, it's unspiritual, and according to James, it's demonic. Jealousy, that's one thing. The other thing is selfish ambition. Now, you can see in this picture here the contrast between selfish ambition on the left and God-focused, humble living to please God type of wisdom on the right. Worldly wisdom says, do what it takes to win, do what it takes to be successful, do what it takes to get ahead. Godly wisdom says, lift others up. Serve, help people to shine. Now, there's nothing wrong with being successful or even being incredibly successful, but here's where you know you've crossed the line. You look back and you see a trail of bodies. That's where you know you've been stepping on people to get to where you feel like you want to be. People have been hurt as you've tried to be as successful or as fast as possible. You want to be thinking when you're talking about this sort of stuff, like 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient. Love is kind. Later on, it's not self-seeking. If you make it, if you make it, but at the cost of having walked on people, maybe you've walked on your family or you've walked on just people around your life. Success at the cost of your kids, success at the cost of your marriage, success at the cost of, employees' lives or coworkers' lives, that is certainly, without a doubt, in the category of selfish ambition. If your pursuit of your professional or your life goals is at the cost of things crumbling around you, selfish ambition is very likely to be at the heart of things there. So don't lie to yourself. Make sure you're being truthful with yourself. The pursuit of success and prosperity is not to come at the cost of the people around you. Godly wisdom says, whatever my platform, whatever my place, how can I lift the people around me higher? Godly wisdom says, God is real, and so I can take the slower path. I can take the slower path that's more kind, that is more gentle, that is patient, that is loving, knowing that God can bless the slow path in unbelievable ways because he's really real and he blesses those who live to please him. Selfish ambition, according to James, is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Verse 16 said here, "For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind." What kind of wisdom you have, it's proven by the fruit, it's proven by the results, says James. Okay, now for the positive. For the positive here, James is now going to describe what godly wisdom actually looks like, and he's going to call it wisdom from above. And so in verse 17 it says, "But the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism and is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness." Now that's quite a list. I'd be curious to know what of those things are jumping out at you and your mind there in that list. First of all, says James here, wisdom from above is first of all pure. Now, what does that mean? It means it's not tainted. There's no mixing of good and bad. It's genuine. It's wholehearted. There's no selfish ambition or jealousy mixed in it. It's pure. And then it says it's peace-loving. It's peace-loving. Later, he's going to go talk about peacemakers here in this same paragraph. We read that. But this peace-loving, this peacemaking person is the one who shows that they really have wisdom from above. It's the peacemakers that have the wisdom from above. I'll tell you about a young Christian, a young Christian I once knew. Let's call him Brian, okay? And once upon a time, true story, this Brian guy started seeing this girl in high school named, Kelly, let's just say. And one day, she brought him a book. She brought him a gift. Yeah, it was a book. I gave it away. She brought him a gift, and he opens it up and discovers it's a book, and the book, he can't remember the name of the title. He can't remember the author. He was looking for, as we were talking about it this week. But the book was How to Walk the Path from Christian Leadership Arrogance to Christian Humility, the path of becoming a more peaceful person and leader. Message received, right? Thank you for that. It actually was a good book. Actually pretty helpful. I read it a long time ago, and I still remember it. But anyways, that was highlighted when that person was, say, 17 or so. But during my years in Bible college and seminary, I'm surrounded by know-it-all Christians. I don't know if you've been around those types. And they love to debate and prove and all these thoughts and perspective. I remember being in the dorm and just like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. heated discussions in the lounge. They thought they were so wise because of, okay, let me just back up. We thought we were so wise with all our reading and our sharp minds, but godly wisdom isn't about what you know. It's about how much you care about loving people, about serving people, but also at the heart of it, about creating peace and peaceful relationships. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. The peacemakers. So how does a wise peacemaking person live? Well, let's put the passage back up here. How does a peacemaking person live? It says that they are gentle at all times. They are gentle at all times. So if you are harsh, abrupt, impatient with people, blunt isn't peacemaking. Clarity is good, but clarity with kindness and gentleness is wisdom. Peace-loving people don't need to persuade people to do things their own way. As it says, they are willing to yield to others. What kind is this wisdom? It's full of mercy. This type of mercy is compassion for those who need help. As you can see in this context, the wise are seeking to lift up those around them, even if it doesn't help them personally at all. In a more success-driven generation, which is what we're looking at, in a more success-focused generation, we miss out how important it is to be people who prioritize creating peace. Creating peace. I quoted Jesus just a moment ago, blessed are the peacemakers, but what about what Paul says in Romans 12? He says, do all that you can to live in peace with everyone, or as far as it is up to you, says Paul. Like, this is a big deal. As you can see, to be someone who is wise, by definition, someone who loves being a source of peace and who loves creating peace where peace is needed, that takes a huge amount of humility, as well as real trust that God's pleased, even if we're not getting ahead in that particular moment or getting our way in that particular moment, that we're living in a way that's pleasing God. I'm going to wrap this up with a picture. Now, this is a real picture. This is called a photograph. This is from the BBC. I've read this article a couple times over the last few years. It keeps coming back to me, but this is a 2019 BBC article on Mount Everest and Sherpas. And this article has got me thinking a lot about several different things, but on Mount Everest, there are climbers and there are Sherpas. And the climbers, they get the photos on the summit. The climbers, they get the headlines. But the Sherpas, they carry most of the equipment. The Sherpas, they fix the ropes and the ladders. The Sherpas break the trail through the deep snow. The Sherpas guide the climbers through some of the most dangerous places on earth. The Sherpas are working harder than anyone on that climb to help the climbers reach the top. And sometimes, the Sherpas are the one taking the pictures of the climber's success. Without the Sherpas, most climbers would never reach the top. The world's wisdom says, be the climber. Be the climber. Get to the top. Get the people around you to help you get to the top. Reach your goals. Reach your dreams. Reach your timelines. And maybe you have to leave some people behind. Maybe you have to walk over some people to get there. But it takes what it takes. Wisdom from above says, be the Sherpas. Be the Sherpa. Help others get there. Help others with their challenges, with their goals, their hopes and dreams. Everyone wants to be the climber. To face the great challenges of life and to triumph and overcome, to succeed with their goals and aspirations, and even to succeed at a faster timeline than everybody else around you. We want to be at the top. We want to win. But the wise people in the kingdom of God are the Sherpas. Greatness through humbly and peacefully serving others. Wisdom from the world says, I want to be in the photos. Wisdom from above is happy to take a picture. James 3, our first verse in this passage said, if you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. If we're honest, some of us have spent a lot of our lives trying to be the climbers. But Christians who actually have real wisdom from above are the ones who quietly say, let me serve. Let me help you. Let me help you get there. When your life is over, the question is going to be, did you know Jesus? That is the question. One of the questions that it's not going to be is, how high did you climb? But you might be asked, just in this connection to, did you love Jesus? You might be asked, how many people reached the top because you helped them? I think it's interesting that in the God's wisdom sort of way that everyone focuses on the climbers and their great journey and overcoming and reaching the top. But on Everest, the Sherpas who are dedicated in helping others reach the top are often the ones who find themselves on the top the most. It seems like a God-focused wisdom sort of the way. When we live to please God and humbly serve others, it's not unusual to look back and discover that while we were helping others reach the summit, God was quietly blessing us with His favor and His goodness. And it turns out, as we set our heart towards pleasing God, we end up reaching where we weren't really striving to go. And it's higher than maybe we would have expected. Here's the challenge for today. The challenge for today is, what three people close to your life could use some help? Do something to help them take a meaningful step forward in their priorities. Help some people. And then secondly, if you're married, ask yourself this question: what can I change or do this week to help my spouse succeed? Now, this is not the challenge where you go to your spouse halfway through the week and say, hey, have you been working on your challenges? Nope. This is you, but you'll know. What can I change or do this week to help my spouse succeed? I want to take a moment to pray here. Now, if you close your eyes with me, I think the first thing I want you to do as we get ready to approach Jesus here, look back. Do you see a trail of bodies on your path to where you've been trying to go? If so, it's time to own that one and say, God, I'm sorry. I've been living with this selfish ambition, obsessed with reaching where I want to go in my path, and I have not done it with gentleness. I haven't been peace-loving. I've been hurting people. Forgive me. Not only forgive me, but bless them. Bring them whatever healing they need for the pains that I've inflicted on their lives, and bless them 10 times. Put people in their lives to help them. And then you can take a moment and talk to God about rededicating yourself to be a peace-loving, peace-making person.